The state of South Carolina is a clown show when it comes to their law enforcement because in just a 10-year span, they've had 13 sheriffs convicted of crimes, not just charged, not just arrested, oh no, convicted of crimes. And now in 2025, we have yet another sheriff who has followed the long tradition of being a criminal in law enforcement in South Carolina. Let me show you what I mean by that.
Suspended Williamsburg County Sheriff Stephen Gardner and former Williamsburg County Supervisor Tiffany Cooks will both be in court. Now, this comes after the state grand jury indicted Cooks and Gardner yesterday on allegations of public corruption.
You're stealing, right to jail.
These allegations claim that Gardner and Cooks conspired to secretly route thousands of government dollars to their personal accounts under the guise of checks written to a third party.
Then that's very illegal. Thief! Stop! Thief! Come back, thief!
And so if you want to understand the corruption of former Williamsburg County Sheriff Stephen Gardner, well, first you got to understand the American Rescue Plan, which was something enacted by Congress in order to provide several means in which to help the American people recover from loss of production, loss of jobs, and especially businesses and local governments. Well, this former sheriff knew about that at that time, and so did the former Williamsburg County Supervisor Tiffany Cooks. And one would think that being a law enforcement professional and an elected sheriff, that this guy would have been law-abiding and he wouldn't just misuse the taxpayers' money now, would he? Oh, but we find out that this guy was up to no good. And the scheme works like this. You see, it happened back about 3 years ago, between June and December of 2022, where Stephen Gardner and Tiffany Cooks are alleged to have redirected some money from the relief funds that were allocated due to the American Rescue Plan. And that money was diverted not to the taxpayers to help them with inflation or the cost of eggs or the cost of rent or the cost of gasoline in South Carolina. Oh, no. We find out that almost $28,000 was diverted to Stephen Gardner's own coffers, and he used that money for personal use. You know, while you're struggling, he was living at large. And so basically these two, Stephen Gardner and Tiffany Cooks, allegedly went to a county contractor, and that contractor handles lawn work. And so the contractor, being none the wiser, decides to accept money on behalf of the sheriff that was supposed to be given to the sheriff in cash. But that person started getting a little bit suspicious when over time, the sheriff would ask this person to meet somewhere in a parking lot and never in the building where there might be some cameras. And as you might imagine, that is a wee bit suspicious. So basically, while once again, everyone else is struggling in South Carolina, one of the poorest states out there with a pitiful minimum wage and high poverty levels, you have this elected sheriff who was out here stealing the taxpayers' money. And that money could have went towards helping an American family stay afloat, but instead this man wanted to rob the people. And he also wanted to receive some additional compensation for working extra hours. But the only problem with that is that in the state of South Carolina and the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act, elected officials cannot receive additional compensation for working extra hours. But let's be honest, Stephen Gardner is no different than any other sheriff in South Carolina. And if you don't believe that, just go read the articles.
It's in their nature, they can't help it.
Maybe we could call the police.
These are the police.
Stop! Thief! Come back, thief!
You're stealing, right to jail.
Business as usual.